Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our webinar, Time for Digital Wellbeing, Privacy and Safety, co-hosted by Euroconsumers and Google, and featuring the presence of European Commissioner for Justice, Didier Reynders. The trigger for today's debate is the publication of a report co-written by Euroconsumers and Google, focusing on digital responsibility, and whose findings will be presented and discussed today during the webinar. Let me set the scene by saying that today there is increased awareness of the dark side of digital pervasiveness among the European population. The health crisis has elevated the importance of the digital economy, as well as the need for effective guarantees concerning data protection, privacy, and the overall digital well-being. No surprise, today we witness, as a result of this realization, clear attempts by consumers, companies, and policymakers to foster new individual practices to protect children and enhance safety. And we're going to give you more illustrations today. The challenge, however, remains how to channel this increased attention towards virtuous, responsible behavior and design new strategies. To discuss this challenge, I would like to welcome our panelists, European Commissioner for Justice Didier Reynders, Kate Charlotte, Director for Data Governance at Google, and Els Bruggeman, Head Policy and Enforcement at Euroconsumer. My first question goes to you, Els. Would you like to share perhaps a few words on the rationale for the collaboration between Euroconsumers and Google behind this report, and perhaps to illustrate some shared objectives that led you to start and embark on this collaboration? Please, Els.
Thank you, Alberto. I might start by kicking in an open door, but I'm going to do it anyway. I think there's no denying anymore that the digital world has a lot to offer. It was already very clear before, and I think the COVID-19 pandemic has reinforced it even more. I mean, let's be frank, where would we have been the last couple of months and year without the digital tools? It allowed us to keep in touch with our loved ones, even if it is over the screen. It allowed us, many of us, to keep our jobs going. It allowed us to buy goods when all the shops were closed. And it even allowed us to monitor via an app whether we were actually in contact with someone that was contaminated by COVID-19. So as consumer organization, we are convinced we need to embrace this digitalization. It has many valuable services to offer. It can help us making choices, speed up the green transition, which is also very necessary. So many opportunities, and we also know that consumers, from our consumer service, we know that many consumers also see this potential. And that's why it's so important that we are able to ensure a digital ecosystem that also delivers to consumers. They need to be able to move freely in it, to thrive in it, and reach its full potential. They need to be able to get a digital ecosystem that fosters innovation, that also benefits consumers. Because let's be honest about it, without consumers on board, you will never reach its full potential. We need to create a digital ecosystem consumers can trust. You know, if we want consumers to move freely, they need to be sure that they are safe, secure, and protected all along the way. We also need a digital ecosystem that empowers consumers. They need to be able to take upon a leading role, and therefore they need to be in charge. They need to be able to decide who are they going to give access to their data, who doesn't, and under what preconditions. And very importantly, we also need to create a digital ecosystem that gives value to consumers. Let's be honest, consumers put a lot of themselves in this digital ecosystem. It's only fair that they also get tangible value and innovation in return. So if you ask us, it's not only about digitalization, it's about responsible digitalization. And to that regard, at Euroconsumers, we are very much convinced that dialogue, that partnership is key. It's in our DNA. I mean, besides also pursuing other tracks, like, for example, creating a strong policy framework, we are convinced that we need to reach out and team up with all other stakeholders that are equally convinced as we are that that collaboration is key. And Does this mean we have to agree on absolutely everything? Absolutely not. I think the Digital Responsibility Report also shows that's not always the case, and that's perfectly okay. But every match we can find what consumers need and what market players are able to offer, this is one step ahead of creating a more balanced ecosystem that is able to deliver to the challenges, the pressing challenges, in a very much better way. And we are very glad to have found a partner in Google for that. The Digital Responsibility Report, actually, it's not the first collaboration we have. It's actually the next step in a 5-year-old partnership between Euroconsumers and Google. And since then, we have been working on many projects, not only at global level, but also nationally in the countries where we are present. For example, in Belgium, Italy, Spain, Portugal, and Brazil. Each and every time to educate consumers, to raise awareness, to empower them, but also to ensure a trustworthy environment for them. And with this Digital Responsibility Report, we wanted to take it to the next level. I've said it before, so many opportunities, but only when it's safe and secure, and consumers can also trust that it's indeed the case. And to that regard, we have to find 3 specific areas that are particularly important for consumers. It's family safety, it's digital well-being, but it's also privacy and security. Now, it's an old adagio, but it's something we use very much in our organization. Knowing starts by measuring. And that's also why this report is actually based on a very large joint survey. It's also our core business doing surveys. And actually these data, they allow us to get a thorough understanding of consumers' behavior, but also what they really expect. It also allows us to open a very open and constructive dialogue on these challenges that were expressed in the report, but above all, it leads the way for many more projects to develop together to improve the digital ecosystem. And I stop here because I'm going to give away too many details that also Kate is going to touch upon.
Thank you, Els, for telling us a bit more about how this collaboration emerged and what are the shared objectives of the study. Let me now turn to Kate Charlotte at Google, and ask her to briefly share with us the major insights that emerge out of this report. Please, Kate.
Thanks, Els. I'm really honored to be part of this conversation on well-being. The digital can bring so many benefits, but it's more important than ever to listen to consumers and to listen to users, understand and have data-driven insights to help us navigate the challenges that folks feel in their day-to-day lives. We've been working with Euroconsumers consumer groups since 2015 in Italy, Belgium, Spain, Portugal, to educate and empower consumers to keep individuals safe online, to overcome some of the concerns and challenges that they may have in navigating the digital world. There's a lot of ways to do this through programs, products, tools, and more. But as Els said, these need to be informed by data and insights about how consumers are feeling in this space and interacting in this space. We decided to focus on the areas that were mentioned: digital well-being, family safety, online privacy and security, because we knew they were top of mind for consumers. And so the hope was, looking into this, we could deepen our understanding of how they're relating to these topics. The goal being, the aim of all of this, of course, is being able to have data, being able to have this insights to inform our current and our future efforts, especially the ones that we're doing jointly with Euroconsumers and Euroconsumers consumer groups. And we also want to strengthen the constructive dialogue that people are having about consumer protection online and the benefits of the digital, not just with Euroconsumers, but also more broadly with other stakeholders and policymakers. And as Els mentioned, grounding these conversations in facts and figures helps make them even more impactful. So thanks to Ipsos and their thorough work, we were able to survey over 18,000 people, drawing in key insights in all of the 3 areas. So let me run through a couple of the highlights from this survey. First, on digital well-being, the research shows that although the majority is not very concerned about their own digital technology uses, it's more common for them to be concerned about other people's use. in particular that of children and teenagers. The results also highlight another interesting duality about people's relationship with digital technology. We're seeing evidence of just how attached some people are to it, but also evidence that people are trying to find a more balanced usage, reducing the amount of time that they spend online. On the second topic, family safety, the research shows that although fewer than half of parents think their children are aware of and understand the potential dangers online, many of them are taking steps to guide their children, talking about what they're doing online, talking about what is appropriate to be doing on social media, and so on. And many of them have established house rules or limits to their children's internet usage. Of course, the third area, given my position here on data governance and privacy here at Google, the area related to privacy and security has been a really interesting part to see the results on for me. And there, many people think that online companies are not open enough about the personal data that they collect and how it's used. Only 19% believe the opposite. The research also shows that the majority of users of the biggest online platforms are aware that they can view and adjust their privacy and security settings, around 66%, and many are doing so. And I was really happy to see this, although of course I'd like it to be higher. We've worked hard on this at Google to give transparency and controls to our users that are very easy to navigate. But I was also happy to see most people who know about it tend to use it, which hasn't always been the case. That's a signal that it's becoming easier to use over time, because if they know, they are more likely to actually go in and invest the time to do it. Most think that the amount of personal data collected online makes it difficult for consumers to protect their privacy. It's almost 70%. And few feel in control of what personal data is collected about them, only 21%. And this is one that, of course, attracted even more of my attention, and it highlights the need to be working with consumers, with Euroconsumers and their consumers group. You know, we have a responsibility, and we have a responsibility as a company to keep bringing privacy into everything that we do. It's something that our CEO, Sundar Pichai, reinforces to us all the time. And what does that mean, right? That means committing to helping more users be in control of their data, being very highly transparent, developing industry-leading controls, and making it as easy as possible for our users. We also have to work together to design for privacy, using our best innovation to keep the benefits of the open web available to everybody, while also protecting privacy and giving consumers the services that Els talked about earlier, the important services that they benefit from in many different parts of life. And then finally, I think we have to be present. We have to engage. We're trying to do more of this through our Google Safety and Engineering Center, the GSEC, a global hub for privacy and safety engineering in Munich. But the survey results really reinforce that last point, how important it is to keep open dialogue, to strengthen that dialogue with Euroconsumers. And as Elle said, of course, there are specific matters where we won't be aligned, but that's where it's even more important to have this kind of dialogue. It helps us as a company gain new perspectives on the concerns that consumers have when they're using products, whether they're launched products already or products that are in the design phase. And it gives us an opportunity to clarify our positions and decisions to folks that are representing first and foremost our most important focus, which is the consumer, the user. So really appreciate the opportunity to be here, to have a dialogue with you all and Commissioner Reinders, and look forward to the debate.
Thank you, Kate, for this very concise sum up of the report major findings on digital responsibility. Commissioner Reinders, what's your reaction to the insights that we have just heard that emerged from the report, and how they fit into your ongoing policy work and multiple initiatives?
Well, thanks, first of all, for this opportunity to discuss with you, and thanks to Mrs. Schaller about the presentation of the findings, because it's an important part, of course, of our discussion. I want also to thank Mrs. Bergerman for the invitation of Euroconsumers to take part today. And first of all, I want to say that, of course, it's important to take into account the reactions that I've just listened now, due to the fact that the digital transition, of course, is already having and will continue to have a major impact of our society, and certainly for the consumers and the children as a part of the consumers. Of course, we have other concerns in the digital transition, and we will discuss more and more about the data protection and the data flows with other partners in the world, but that is another issue that we need also to take into account on the basis of the GDPR. But the findings of your joint report, from the concern of parents for their children's digital well-being to personal data worries, are concern I share and the Commission share, and we try to work on it. And take data protection, I will take maybe some figures. Take data protection for a start. You see that only 19% of respondents think online companies are open about their data processing practices. I don't know if there's a specific figure about the Google, but in general, it's the reaction of the respondents. Or 69% think the amount of personal data collected online makes it difficult for consumers to protect their privacy. And so the protection of privacy is a real concern. You are working since some years on this in Europe, and we try to convince some US partners to do the same, and maybe one day to have not only some legislation at the state level in the US, but maybe a federal legislation about the privacy. We will see if it's possible to move on this. And I can add to this, on the one hand, since the GDPR came into force, citizens are more aware of their rights, and they are more active in exercising their rights. It is very encouraging that close to 70% of EU citizens are aware, at least, of the GDPR, so the existence of the GDPR. I'm not speaking about the content, and know that there is a national data protection authority to turn to in case of a problem. So it's a first element. We have seen such a kind of progress, but on the other hand, as many as 40% of EU citizens still do not want to share their personal data with a private company. There is still trust missing, something I know you recognize as key to empowering consumers to thrive in the new data economy. And so the GDPR is part of the solution, but the main concern is to build more and more trust between the consumers and the companies, but also between the citizens and the authorities in the way to manage the personal data and the data in general. For example, in the context of the current pandemic, the strength of the legislation and citizen trust in it was essential in getting citizens to sign up to using voluntary contact tracing apps. But you know that till now, it's very difficult to have a real efficient mechanism with the tracing apps. To give an example, in Europe, we have put into place a gateway at the EU level, and for the moment, we have 16 member states taking part in the process, and it's not all the time evident. And now we'll have maybe the same discussions about a sort of digital COVID certificate to organize a common approach in Europe. So again, trust, it's a very important element, but there are some concerns. The concerns are, if I may, enforcement needs to be strengthened. So we are sure that we need to work more and more about the correct enforcement. More efficient working arrangements need to be put in place between data protection authorities, especially when there are cross-border disputes. There needs to be more uniformity in the implementation of the rules by member states across the Union, and we are working on it if it's needed, with infringement proceedings at the end before the Court of Justice. And we need to ensure that citizens who are much more aware of their data protection rights, thanks to the GDPR, can make full use of those rights. And I know that there are some specialists doing that, but I'm not sure that for all the citizens and all the consumers for the moment, it's very clear what is possible to do when you are traveling a lot on the web, and that you need to respond to many questions that you receive. So we need to see how it's possible to facilitate the exercise of the rights given by the GDPR by all the citizens. And with regards to children's data, you flag the concerns of parents in your report, and this is governed by a specific category of rules in the GDPR. Children, of course, are less aware of the risks and consequences of sharing data and of their rights online. Therefore, parental consent is required for most online services. Information given to a child about their data must be adapted so it is plain and intelligible for the child. I've said sometimes that we have around 24 different languages in the European Union, but we need a 25th to be able to discuss with the children on all the regulation that we are putting in place, because it's already very difficult for the parents to understand the language that you are using. And as regards parental consent, a key question is how you guarantee that is really the parent or guardian signing off. This is not technically feasible right now and would deserve further attention at work. So we need to continue to see what are the possible safeguards on this. Another key issue is age verification or proof of age. On top of all this is the underlying fact that there is a difference between member states on the age of consent in relation to information society services. And you know, the GDPR provides member states with the possibility to further specify this age of consent, normally 16, but with the possibility to lower it to 13. This raises complex issues for companies active across many member states, and I'm not thinking only of Google, but of any digital company, and as digital is by definition cross-border, of course, not only in Europe, but in the entire world. As the Commission set out in the review of the GDPR last year, we are now looking ourselves into tools to clarify or support the application of data protection rules to children. We are going to launch a pilot project shortly, so I cannot say very much at this stage, but what I can say is that the aim is to prove the capacity of an interoperable technical infrastructure dedicated to the implementation of child protection mechanisms, such as age verification and parental consent mechanisms based on the GDPR, as well as the Audiovisual Media Services Directive. So it will be maybe in close collaboration with the major actors on internet, because there are many very important concerns for the parents in the way to protect the children in the use of internet. It is, of course, not only the protection of data in the digital era where they are concerned, as your report shows. When shopping in the digital world, the customer is more removed from the seller, and therefore a relationship of trust is far harder to ensure, not least because rogue sellers can and do use the digital space to their advantage, but also to the disadvantage of consumers. We have seen just how fast criminals can adapt with the sale of fake COVID-19 related products. We have started with many fake masks without any effect. We have seen some tests, and now we have the first indication about fake vaccines, or at least the black market of vaccines. I'm thinking first of all about the Russian vaccine. We have seen some possibility to have online sales of vaccines, and you understand it's a very difficult issue and very dangerous issue because we don't know what is it, in fact. Is it a vaccine or not? And in the digital world, the enforcement by authorities of rules protecting consumers is a lot harder. Let me give you just a few concrete examples. The Commission was recently alerted to some worrying practices, and you have seen that, of TikTok. Not the same kind of discussion maybe that it was possible to have in the US about TikTok, but concerns about worrying practices, namely their terms of services which were considered unclear and only available in English, questionable practices for the processing of users' personal data, and an absence of adequate measures to protect vulnerable users, including children, from targeted advertisements. We are also aware of practice by Amazon Prime, practices that the Norwegian Consumer Council has analyzed that make it intentionally very difficult for users to cancel a subscription. And it's very important to be able to go out of the subscription if you want to do so. In a digital world, the safety of products themselves is harder to guarantee. Products bought online, for example, are more likely not to have traceability information. And I was mentioning the vaccines. Of course, it becomes to be very dangerous about pharmaceutical products or other kinds of products. These are just some of the consumer angles that are covered in the communication published today, Europe's Digital Decade. The Commission is already working on many of these problems. Over the past year, I'm extremely grateful for our work with Google and major platforms, which led to millions and millions of fraudulent listings being removed. And we will continue to work with that. It's a real collaboration with some pledge about the safety of the products. And I'm sure it's very important to have voluntary actions coming from the platform, but we want to go further with the Digital Services Act, and we want to go further with a revision of the General Product Safety Directive to impose some obligations to all the platforms, not only to work with the major platforms that we all. Maybe to conclude, I want to say that TikTok is currently again the subject of discussions between the Commission and national consumer protection authorities. The European Data Protection Board is also looking into the company's practices around data protection. But there are many other angles where long-term solutions need to be found. This is something we also flagged in the new consumer agenda, which I presented last year in November. Next up will be a revision, I said, of the General Product Safety Directive, as well as the directives for consumer credit to protect vulnerable consumers, to take into account new actors on the web, and maybe also to see if there are some possibilities to give more information to the consumers online. And the marketing of financial services is also in our actual discussion. And we will keep supporting the national consumer authorities in tackling illegal online practices. The basic message is simple. Online or offline, in the EU, a consumer should benefit from the same level of protection. And during the pandemic, now again, we are seeing that there are more and more sales online due to the situation. And of course, we need to take care of different kinds of practices. I've mentioned just some of those practices to protect the consumers. Thank you again for having the possibility to react to the findings of your study, but also to explain what we are doing now. And again, before the pandemic, it was a priority of the Commission to work on two transitions, the green transition and the digital transition. Of course, we have seen that we need to continue to work on the green transition, but the digital transition become to be more and more important. And we will try to take advantage of different kind of discussions like today to see what are the main concerns, but what are maybe the most vulnerable public. And again, the children is a real concern to us, because we are sure that it's very difficult, and we will continue to work on it to protect children in their access to internet and to the online services. And of course, there are different categories of children. I've mentioned the age. It's a real issue, but it's true that as parents, we are all knowing that it's quite difficult to organize a real protection of the children, sometimes against their intention to go further on the web. But thanks again.
Thank you. Thank you very much for sharing these initial reactions to the report and somehow contextualize these findings in pre-existing and ongoing policy initiatives. Commissioner Reinders highlighted the fact that data protection remains the major area of concerns among users. So perhaps we might want to spend a few more minutes on the issue, because increased digitalization, which has been accelerated by COVID-19, is also translating into an increased data collection, not just on patients or consumers, but also in the context of education, work, and social life, areas that were a bit more insulated from, let's say, digital outreach. On this topic, it could be very interesting to hear a bit more from Kate, considering Google recent announcement in terms of ads personalization, where Google announced that basically you will stop selling ads based on individuals browsing across multiple websites. And this is potentially a game changer for the digital advertising industry and address some of the consumer concerns we have been discussing over the last few minutes. Kate.
Great, thanks. And really, if there's one thing, the work that we've done with Euroconsumers here, if there's something that's reinforced, it's that putting the consumer front and center needs to be an important guide. And this is very true in what Commissioner Reinders was saying about children's privacy and safety. Difficult, but if not, the most important thing we can do for our families and for consumers. I also think the best way for companies to do this is not just with words, but by leading with product decisions. The Ipsos figures we talked about today reflect the fact that people have concerns about how their data is used, and this includes, how their personal identity is being used for digital advertising. And that's why we made the announcement that we did recently about our work to chart a course towards a more privacy-first web. As many folks that are listening know, we announced this intention to phase out third-party cookies. We announced that last year. And with our latest announcement, we're making something very explicit. When cookies get phased out, we will not build alternate ways to track individuals as they browse across the web. We will not use these in our ads products. And that's partly because some techniques have been emerging in the ecosystem. Fingerprinting is an example of this. It's the use of something like your font, your language, and other characteristics of your browser or your device to identify and track your unique device. More recently, PII graphs, which are identifiers based on people's personal information like email addresses. They're hashed or encrypted, but it is still something that's based on PII. We don't think these techniques rise to consumers' expectations, as as illustrated in the survey that we did. We don't think these techniques meet those rising expectations for privacy, and we also don't think they stand up to the rapidly evolving regulatory environment. So while others might continue to offer these techniques, we will not. Our web products will be powered by privacy-preserving methods like aggregation, anonymization, on-device processing, and other capabilities that prevent individual tracking while still delivering results for advertisers and publishers. And it's critical that we find these capabilities that do both. We believe in the open web, which is supported by advertising. We also believe in privacy. So we can talk about Privacy Sandbox more another day, but it's our way of collaborating with the advertising ecosystem to enable that advertising functionality that's so important for small businesses and publishers and an entire ecosystem of content providers, but to provide that functionality, but using privacy-preserving methods. So it's something that I think is great timing for the conversation today, because it's something that's really driven by consumers. It's a consumer-driven step to work with industry partners and build that web future for advertising. It's a pretty distinct choice that we made. I'm proud of the work that we've done on this. There's obviously a lot more to do, not just in the advertising space, but in many different aspects of data protection and privacy that we need to work together on and drive forward. But we believe this is a good step forward.
Thank you, Kate, for sharing such an illustration, which is happening now. Product decisions as the best answer to consumer concerns. I think this will inevitably set a precedent for the industry, and some other players will have no choice but to follow up. I guess this is the hope of the entire digital ecosystem. Els, what is the consumer perspective on where we stand on the state of play of data protection, in particular when we think about personal data?
It's like Commissioner Reinders also stressed, it's all about trust, and for trust, for that you need a strong and a solid data protection. I mean, if you see in our report that 69% finds it, because of the amount of data that's being collected, they find it really difficult to protect themselves. And if you see that only 1 out of 5 feels in control, then it's crystal clear that still a lot needs to be done. Of course, we will need to have a closer look to what Google proposed with the FLOC and what the impact is on consumer privacy, but also, for example, on competition and freedom of choice. But I do think that what it already reflects is that we do share the same concerns to ensure consumers' trust and the need to address the very tangible and very concrete privacy concerns that consumers do have. And this is exactly what we aim for by talking to each other, by giving each other our insights, by sharing our concerns. And this is what we have been working on very, very closely in the last couple of months and years. Trying to understand each other, but also to convince each other. Because let's be clear about it, we both need strong and empowered consumers to take upon an active role and really thrive in this data economy. And maybe to that regard, and on a more general note, when it comes to data protection, empowering consumers is a very important side of the story. They need to be in charge, they need to be in control, they need to be able to take their data to whoever they want, they need to be able to say yes, and they need to be able to say no. And decide on what conditions they do all of this, making sure that when they do, they get also valuable services in return. Because only that way they will be able to take upon this leading role. And for that, they need easy to use tools that put them in charge of their data. And to that regard, we also welcome the steps ahead that Google has made in that regard. However, if empowering consumers is a very important part of the story, then another very important part is to ensure a solid framework, a trustworthy framework that guarantees that consumers' privacy is actually protected all along the way. This means having privacy by design, having privacy by default. Empowered consumers, they need to have this trusty framework that enables them to move freely and in an empowered way. It's actually a bit of a precondition, and I'm pretty sure if we don't reach that, we will never reach the common goal that we have of ensuring consumers' trust. And that's also the beauty of this dialogue, that we are able to express this to each other and that we can push for more needs to be. And important steps have indeed been made. And as Kate said, the challenge is huge, so let's continue that way. This is what you do in a mature relationship. You share your ideas, you share your concerns, and you try to move ahead. This is what you do in a mature relationship, and this is definitely what we intend to keep on doing in that way.
Thank you, Els, for sharing your perspective on this. Commissioner Reinders, in your opening remark, you have been identifying some possible solutions to improve the state of play regarding data protection. You refer to the fact that overall awareness about GDPR, also positive signal about the ability of consumers to try to invoke some of this provision. You mentioned the possibility to actually envisage some children dedicated policy options that you are somehow envisaging. Can you perhaps comment a bit further on these points and also react to what we just heard from Google and from Euroconsumers, please?
Then thank you. Maybe first, I've said we need to assure a correct implementation of the GDPR. That's the first element in the different member states. So we are working on it. It's very important to continue to clarify. We've started the key concept and to give some answers to many questions, because there are many questions about the GDPR. I'm thinking about the SMEs asking all the time if it's possible to have more flexibility, but there are some flexible rules in the GDPR. So first of all, we need to do that. And so I've said, if it's needed with some action by the Commission, if it's without a correct implementation in one member state, it will be at the end possible to go to the Court of Justice because it's a regulation. We need also to be sure that the data protection authorities are well equipped about the role that they have received from the GDPR, because that means that we need to be sure that they have enough human resources, financial resources, but also technical resources. And you know that Google knows that also, that there are some data protection authorities with more companies involved in the process online located in their jurisdiction than others. And so when we are speaking about the situation in Ireland, to give an example, of course, we need to pay attention to the fact that there's enough resources in such a country. So first of all, a correct implementation. A second element is the common interpretation of the rules. So I said we need to answer to many questions, but it's not just the role of the different the national data protection authorities. We have a board, we have DDPB, and we are trying to work very closely in relation with DDPB to try to organize a common interpretation. It's not all the time possible. There are different situations, but again, to try to give a correct information on the way forward. And we don't want to change the GDPR. For the moment, the evaluation have proved that the first element is the implementation, the correct common interpretation, and not to change the rules. I want to say that it's also to avoid the risk to open the Pandora box, because if we are starting a revision of the GDPR, we are opening many other discussions. But then I'm sure that, like I said, there are different kind of other elements. It's possible to think about specific tools to help different categories of users, and certainly the children and their parents. And so I said we are working on it to see how it's possible to give more credibility to the different rules about the age verification. And it's true that there are some possibility to identify with footprint, with other kind of mechanism. We have seen the facial identification of the smartphone, but also maybe on some applications and so on. What are the possible tools to give a real credibility to the different mechanisms that we have put into place as a safeguard? But I want also to add that there is a role for the platforms in such a way. It's first a common action from the platforms and maybe the authorities is the education. In the education, I see two different elements. First, to fight against the skills, digital skills gaps that we have. So of course, we need to organize an accessibility to the web and an inclusivity for all the citizens. But also, we need to explain better to the children, again, but maybe also to the adults, the risks of the online world, and the risk is going together with the protection. What are the possible protection? And that's very important to do maybe in the educational process, but maybe also through a better information given by the platforms that when you are working with some actors. And just to add two elements, maybe just to conclude on this. The first one, you know that we have adopted the Digital Services Act, and we'll go further about the product safety. But there's a real role now for the platform. We'll go further than the code of conduct. It was possible for many platforms like Google to start the process, but we'll ask to give an example to check the credentials of your business users, because it's the principle know your business customer, and we want to be sure that you have a better relation to understand what are the different users, and to organize also a compliance by design, to organize a process where it's possible for the business users to comply with their information obligations by the design of the platform and to have a simple access. But then I'm sure that if I'm looking to the citizens and the consumers, we find a way to give the opportunity for the citizens to have only one gate to explain what are the authorizations and the limitations they want to apply to all the different actors online. Because for the moment, it's very difficult, and we have seen that after the GDPR, like me, you have received hundreds, maybe thousands of mail to say, is it possible to explain to one company and to another one what you want to do? We need to think about the possibility, maybe through the platforms, but to give to the citizens and the customers, the consumers, the possibility to explain in one document, maybe online, what are the possible use of their personal data, but what are also the restrictions that they want to apply, and not to be obliged to do that to all the different actors separately. And so we need also to think about through the new developments, maybe in AI also, to organize such a kind of process. Because to be honest, I don't want to repeat what I've said before in another webinar, because I've received many criticisms to that, but I've seen some children, to don't speak about me, trying to find an information on internet, maybe on Google. And then, because you are going from one website to another one, you receive many questions about the cookies, about the limitation they want to put or not. But the goal is to find an information. So not me, but I've seen some children responding all the time, yes, to all the questions, to go faster to the information. And so it's abnormal that you need to repeat all the time what you agree or not about the data protection. And again, maybe one day we'll have the possibility to organize a single one answer to explain how do you want to apply the GDPR in your personal situation for all the different users.
Thank you, Commissioner. I think your point is of interest. So I would be curious to hear from Google, but also from your consumers later on about a greater role to play by platforms in enhancing responsible and safe use, and also facilitating the literacy and the awareness about those rights, and overcoming the current situation that is very much epitomized by the cookie directive, which is a bit of a nightmare that allows you to tick the box without even reading, because we are obviously trading convenience against our fundamental rights. Kate, your take on this?
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. It can feel overwhelming, that experience as you're moving from place to place online. It's so important for controls to be intuitive, to be simple, to be able to speak to different audiences, as the age-appropriate design code and other conversations around children's privacy have made clear. How do you reach those audiences in the right way at the right moment, so that it feels intuitive, so that it feels understandable in terms of the decision making that is happening. So, I mean, look, I think this is personal for all of us. We're all stretched thin with work and childcare. I like to feel confident that when my kindergartner is online, that I don't have to worry about the material that she's accessing. So I like to use curated content. We're all having a harder time setting boundaries between work and family. So I set do not disturb tool when I want to prevent my work notifications. But what works for me doesn't necessarily work the same way for others. And so we need a range of tools to be able to enable and inform that experience, to promote the digital well-being that is so important, that this survey has really has highlighted. And that might be something different for somebody else than it is for me. And that's why the dialogue and the exchange to help build those tools and build a toolkit of capabilities for users to interact the way that they feel safe and that their privacy is protected online. It's a really delicate group in our society. Children are growing up with technology. They're not growing into the technology like previous generations. So it couldn't be more important.
Thank you, Kate. Elsa, what is your perspective on this kind of expectations of different stakeholders to play a greater role also in facilitating the enforcement of GDPR and the existing regulatory frameworks applicable to different categories, who are by definition more vulnerable than others?
It's true, we each have our own perspective and our own role to play, and we should keep on doing this by all means. But it's also true that just by talking to each other, touch base, and maybe join forces, each from our own perspective, together we can maybe do more. So every match we can find between all kinds of stakeholders, whether it's business or policymakers, it can be a step forward to a more balanced system that also faces the challenges. And we have heard a lot of challenges here. And as a mother of 2 kids, I really hear you. I have having the same experience. You know, there's a saying, alone you can walk faster, but together you will get further. But I think this is very much true, because the challenges are indeed very big, not only on privacy and security, where we have touched upon in the previous part, but also on family safety and digital well-being. I mean, if I have a look on how much time I spend on my mobile phone every day, or the battles I need to have with my children, trying to prevent them of turning into some kind of a game addict, I mean, it's an eye-opener. And actually also these considerations and these concerns, they have also been the basis of many of the joint projects that we have worked upon already with Google in the last couple of years, to raise awareness, to educate people, consumers. I'm talking about consumers, but to educate actually children and their parents, to empower them and make sure they have a safe environment. And we have been doing this not only at Euroconsumers level, but also in many of our countries. Just as a matter of example, I can maybe share the experience we have had with the Cyber Simple campaign, which was developed together with our Belgian member, Testacha. And it was a very nice campaign where together we were able to draft tips and tricks for children, for consumers to be safe online. Very easy going, straightforward, sometimes a no-brainer, but still very important to actually give this information to consumers. For example, how to have a safe password. It seems so obvious, but we need to be aware that many consumers are not even aware how to create a safe password. And together we have been able to do this in a very accessible way, and also a very child-friendly way. And in fact, it has become some kind of a tool that could be used within the family. And since then, also other partners have joined this Cyber Simple campaign. For example, the Belgian cybercrime unit has joined, but also the organizations representing families and child protection organizations. And actually afterwards, when polling with our consumers, because as a consumer organization, we of course respond in the first place to consumers, but when polling with them what they found of it, this was actually the campaign that popped up as being the most valuable and a much appreciated one by the consumers of all the campaigns that we have been doing. So this says something. Maybe another example, but this time from Italy, and I apologize already for my Italian, but it's worth mentioning. I have an Italian boss, this makes it even more embarrassing, but we had a project in Italy called Vivi Internet al Meglio, which was launched in 2018. It's also a program to help kids, but alongside with the teachers and with the parents to become good internet citizens. It included, among others, a parents quiz that was hosted by our member in Italy, Euroconsumers. We also presented it at the biggest kids film festival in Italy. And we even started with a new initiative, namely the parents workshop. Instead of also always focusing on the kids, it's also very important to educate the parents on how to handle it. And I can give already a heads up, more is yet to come, but I'm not going to say already what it will be, but more is to come. And this is exactly also what we need to do as modern consumer organizations. This is what we are convinced of, to reach out and team with every stakeholder in the policy field and with the business side that are equally convinced that we can do more by just working together and sharing our visions and move forward in the best way.
Thank you for sharing these illustrations. A question for Commissioner Reinders on these sort of collaborations. Let's say that collaborations between consumer groups and industry are not very common, right? They are a bit of an exception in the overall ecosystem that we perceive in Brussels. They are often sensed by public opinion with some suspicion, with some concern. Is it enough? Is it scalable? Those are the kind of concern. What's your perspective, Commissioner, on these collaborations? What's been your experience over the years? You've been a policymaker for several decades with different responsibility. What's your take?
But maybe about the experience in the last months, also during the COVID-19, we have had, some problems in the travel sector with the right to be reimbursed for the consumers in the case of cancellation of flights by airlines companies, or in the case of cancellation of some travels with the tour operators. And so we have had to apply the package travel directive. And I've tried to organize discussions not only with, on one hand, the consumers, on the other hand, the tour operators or the airlines company, but to put all together and to explain to both that it's very important to see what are the main solutions to try to comply, to be in full compliance with the EU law and to don't have too many problems for the different actors. I mean, we have given the possibility for the member states to give state aid to airlines companies, to tour operators, to travel agencies. But with the state aid, it must be possible not only to pay the workers, to pay the suppliers, but maybe also to reimburse the consumers. And so sometimes we put together. The second element in the consumer agenda in November last year, now we have installed the first, with the first meeting, the new advisory group for the consumer policy. And for the first time, we try to put all the actors together and not to have different groups with the consumer organizations, the businesses and the academics. We try to put all together. And of course, it will be sometimes challenging, but it's better to have a real confrontation, if I may, and not to try to say yes to all in different ways, and then to try to come with a regulation or a proposal. So try to do that. But it's the same, if I may, with the platforms and the actors in the online world, because I'm very convinced, also with the experience of the last years, that it's important to try first to have a voluntary collaboration with the platforms and maybe with other actors in other fields, but here online with the platforms, to see what is possible for the platform to do more than the regulation. So to go further than the regulation. And we have seen that in the product safety, but also in the fight against hate speech or in the fight against some scams in the COVID-19, that it's possible for the platform to do more than the requirement of the law. But then after that, when we have a sort of expertise on this, it's possible to transform the voluntary commitment in an obligation in the law. And in an obligation due to the fact that then we want to have a level playing field with all the different actors and not just to work with some platforms. And it's the reason why we try to do that for the product safety, but we try also now to do that with the green consumption. We ask to many companies to take part in some green consumption pledges. And I'm sure that when we will have the experience of the DSA or the experience of other kind of new regulation, it will be important to continue to work with the major actors, to ask to those major actors to take more commitment than the law, because the law is not the limitation. It's not because it's not enshrined in the law that you have all the possibility to do anything. And so that's the best way to have a good collaboration. So to put all the different actors to get together, that's the first way, but also to try all the time to think about the next legislation, maybe, with a real experience together between the authorities and the main actors. And I must say that, I will say that with Google because we have such an opportunity today, but it was true with the major actors online during the pandemic, and we have seen a real effect. And I'm sure due to what? Due to, again, it's a question of trust. If you don't do that as a platform, or if you don't do that as an operator, you risk to lose the trust and the confidence of the consumers. And you know that to build the trust, it's a very long way. To lose the trust, it's a question of seconds sometimes. And so it's very important to, I'm not naive, just to give an example to show that we are not naive. We are working now on an action plan on the safety of the products with China. And is it just because China wants to protect the European consumers? I'm not sure, but it's also a question of trust. If they want to export more and more to Europe, they need maybe to enhance the safety of the products, and they have more and more an internal market. They need also to give an answer to their own consumers. So I'm not sure, again, that it will be with the same level of protection that we try to organize in Europe. But for the first time, we have engaged a real dialogue with China. Again, it's a question of trust. And so I don't want to compare the platforms in China, but you know that there are some platforms coming from China.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'm very pleased to hear your perspective, which is very much aligned to my own scholarship over the years in criticizing the public consultations of the Commission for being too unilateral. It's just about inputs you receive. You don't really know how to handle them. It creates a lot of expectations. What about if we replace them or we complement them with a more deliberative process in which the different parties engage, exchange? There's much more contradictions, and all the added value would be created as a result. I think this is an encouraging practice, and it's good to hear that it's happening informally and formally in your daily work. Time is up, so 60 seconds final comment by each of you on looking into the future. So what is your expectation? What is gonna be the major breaking force, the major lever that will somehow enhance the overall trust, safety, use of the internet? Kate.
Couldn't agree more that everything we do should be driving towards that trust. A big part of that needs to be innovation, pushing the edges of how we are applying new technology and new capabilities to do both, to provide the services that people need, as well as protect them in privacy. It's going to take partnership. No one company or platform can do it alone, but I think we're really seeing a growing emphasis and focus on privacy enhancing technologies, and I'm really looking forward to where that takes us.
Thank you, Kate. Your final message to the audience, Els?
The challenge is huge, so I don't think there's one single silver bullet. It will take many tracks to create this trust, and policy is one of them, enforcement if needed is one of them, but also partnership is, in my opinion, one of them, exactly because we need to keep on challenging each other, push for more, go beyond what is already required, push for innovation. So it's actually not one or the other, it's the whole package you need to take on.
Thank you, Els. Commissioner Reinders, a final message word for you based on what you've heard, what you have engaged with in terms of content.
It's maybe a final word for today, but we'll have many opportunities to continue such a conversation. And just to say that we need to build the future together. And so it's true that it's very important to try to see that there are some obligations for all the different actors to engage the process. And so we need to work on education. It's a real issue. Education, I said, to give enough skills, digital skills, to all the different children will be the adults of tomorrow, but also to organize a real explanation about the rights online and the protection online, because it's a question to work together on this. But of course, we need to take on board on the digital transition the supply side, so all the different businesses, but also the demand side, and that is the consumers, or with the authorities, the citizens. And to build the trust, it's very important to give a real perspective to all the different actors, certainly the supply side and the businesses, but also the consumers, and in the relation with the authorities, the citizen. But I want to do that without any break to innovation, creativity, because we are knowing that we will speak, to give an example, about AI in the near future. We'll come with an horizontal approach on AI. We want to have a human-centric approach. We want to continue to protect the citizens and the consumers, to be sure that we have full respect for the fundamental rights, but without any break to innovation, creation and development of new technologies, because we need to do that in Europe. It's time for Europe maybe to invest more and more in such a kind of new technology. So again, trust will be the key word.
Thank you. Thank you. On this note, I would like to thank all of you as panelists who have been contributing to our discussions, and to the audience. Thank you so much, and see you soon again. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.